And we are live. Hello, everybody. Welcome to another War and Pieces. It's your old pal, Rob. And today, we have Andrew Rader, the actual... This is a beast, okay? I'm going to make sure that I get this in here.
Yeah.
The designer of this tremendous game, Stellar Horizons. I almost forgot for a second there. But we're going to talk about that soon. I want to talk to you about a few things because you are an amazing character, my friend. Okay. First of all, you work for SpaceX. Is that correct?
Yep.
Which is amazing. MIT, author, game designer, YouTuber. You won the second season of a Canadian Know-It-All. Is that correct too?
Canada's Greatest Know-It-All. Yeah.
Greatest Know-It-All.
Yeah.
Okay. I mean, is there anything that you don't do?
Tap dance, ballet, not very dancing in general. Actually, not very.
Dancing in general.
Yeah, I find it really hard to learn dance moves.
I'm amazed at some of the things that you've done here, and you know, as I was reading and trying to learn more about you and things like that, the thing that really fascinated me, and I can relate to it to some way, and correct me if I'm wrong, okay? You're very good at anything that you do. But do you get to the point where you have to keep challenging yourself and you do something else?
Yeah, I think so. So, for example, this game project has been going on for about 15 years, and it's
this here,
yeah,
because I want to get to that because it ties in to some of the things that I've noticed, especially with some of the books that you've written and things like that. You're somebody that from what I gather that you in exploration, you just want to keep on expanding. There's no end to what we can go out and we can find. And this is a passion project, basically saying, hey, look at the things that we can do and what more we can do in the future. And it's totally a vision of your future.
Yeah, totally. Yeah.
And I'm totally blown away by it. I finally got the game in today, but I've been reading on it. I downloaded the manual and everything, and I can't wait to get my hands on it. I've been very excited about this. And Bill, thank you for finally getting this to me. I appreciate it. But unbelievable because everything in this thing feels very realistic.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, that's the whole intention. Yeah. When I was a kid, I really liked Star Trek, but I thought, oh, well, that's kind of totally fiction. How are we ever going to get to that? Regular space, I didn't find that interesting. And this sort of tells the story for me of how we get from where we are now to Star Trek. And so it uses only technologies that we think are actually plausible. You know, the most out there technologies are antimatter, which we know exists, but we don't really know how to harvest it and how to contain it, but you could figure that out. And so that's the most advanced technology, right? Or hibernation of crews in space. And so it's kind of the whole goal of the game is to sort of tell the story of how we get from our current space program to basically Star Trek.
And it's an amazing thing because it really does that. And I was completely blown away by some of the things that you've done here and how realistic you kept it. Now, I'm not going to mention any other space games, but a lot of times when I've played space games, I mean, you can actually, and a friend of mine said this to me, and it's stuck in my head. Well, you know something, you could make that a tractor trailer game. You know, where you go out and you deliver things and then you come back with it. I mean, there's no difference in that. And you could put it to even, an ocean liner game. This does something totally different. And
yeah, I think it sort of goes to game philosophy. I once heard that European game designers care much more about the mechanism of the game. So they'll find a mechanism and then kind of fit a theme to it, right? Like, this is a great game mechanic, so I'm going to think of a storyline to go with it, right? And American game designers, I guess, theoretically kind of, they want to tell the battle of the Civil War. They want to tell, I don't know, Shiloh or something like that. And then they try to find mechanisms that fit to the story they're trying to tell. I think it's definitely the latter in this case. So I wanted to tell the story of how we get from our current space program to Star Trek. And then I tried to find a way to do that, and it's definitely inspired by their games. I mean, it's sort of like Civilization or Master of Orion. Those are especially the tech tree is basically exactly the same as how Civilization works, or Master of Orion or something like that. So it's totally inspired by those games. In fact, you could almost say it's a bit like Civilization in space, maybe. Actually, a friend of mine described it as World in Flames in space, because I mean, I did a lot of design for World in Flames, and you can tell a lot of it.
You did the two expansions with another gentleman, and that was amazing to even have expansions for that.
Yeah, we did I did the World War I version of World in Flames, because if you think about World in Flames, you take away the airplanes, you take away the tanks, and it's pretty much World War I already. So then you just need, if it's just infantry, it's kind of like World War I. Then you need like some specialty units for chrome and fun, like gas units, and you do need planes, of course. But what did planes really do in the First World War? They did observation, so you had to find sort of observation rules, and then the observation rules are assumed to exist all the time in World War II. So in World of Flames, it's like World in Flames, you actually have to find the troops with your observers, right? But by the time you get around to World War II, there's tons of reconnaissance planes, so it's just happening all the time. It's automatic, right? So it assumes that something's automatic. Yeah.
You know, another thing that I found absolutely unbelievable is that you were actually considered for a one-way trip to Mars. Is that not true?
Yeah, I was going for that. I mean, I think that is not happening in the short term. So that, but I wrote a book about why it makes sense, basically. Yes, and was put my name in the hat because I thought, hey, what do you got to lose except go to Mars? But I do think it's a good idea. Yeah, well, I do think it's a good idea. So people say that you would never come back, but I mean, in some sense, life is a one-way journey, right? Like, you got to spend your life in some way, and if you're doing something important with it, I think it's totally rational to do that. Not to say that you would go and just like die immediately, but if we can keep people alive and send them supplies and stuff, it's kind of a good way to use your life, I think. So why not, right? And I do think I actually probably wouldn't do it now because I have family and stuff, but I do still think it's a rational thing to do. I don't know that that's the way we'll do it, but I still think it's rational. But I was actually in consideration for the actual astronaut program twice.
Exactly. Yeah. Now, I live in Florida, okay? So I get to see all this stuff. And growing up as a kid, okay, and I'm way older than you'll ever be, okay? My hero when growing up was Alan B. Shepard.
Okay.
I mean, love the guy, follow the guy, always wanted to meet the guy. I lived up in Connecticut, near where you went to go to school, MIT in Massachusetts, and then we moved down here. Did you have anybody that in any of the space programs or anything like that inspired you to be what you are? Or are you just such an adventurer, or somebody that so sees outside the box that this was just what you wanted? You look to the stars.
Yeah, it's funny because actually when I was a kid, I did like science fiction always, and I did like Star Trek. But as I said, I kind of wasn't that into regular space. I kind of thought it's boring unless we can go and have adventures and meet the aliens and go to other stars and have Captain Spock and stuff like that, right? I thought regular space is kind of like, well, what's the point of going up and floating around, right?
Right.
So yeah, I mean, I had a few really inspirational teachers, not particularly to do with space, but just curiosity in general and learning about the world. And then in university, I actually went to university because I was interested in history to study how to build airplanes, because I wanted to build my own Mitsubishi Zero and fly it around, because it's really easy to fly, good handling, really long range. It seems like it's the ideal hobby plane, actually.
Yeah, absolutely.
Minus the really flammable non-self-sealing fuel tanks. But hopefully you're not going to take a lot of rounds anyway. So anyway, yeah. So I went to build airplanes, but then I had a roommate who was super inspirational, and he kept saying, "Oh, well, we should go to Mars." And I thought, "Oh, well, that's stupid. What's the point of that, right?" And then I also read some books, and I kind of had this sort of epiphany and realization that if we want to become Star Trek, we have to start doing the things we can with what we have. And it's all about pushing ourselves. And this is how the evolution of human technology has always worked. It's that humans are basically explorers, and we started out as apes on the plains of Africa, and just by pushing ourselves, we develop better technology. And the better technology doesn't come around. It doesn't come if you don't push for it, right? It's the act of pushing, the act of exploration that generates technology. It's not that, I mean, technology does enable exploration, but really exploration creates the incentives that drive technology. And I think it's the reverse of the way we usually see it. And I think that's the super important thing. And that's the whole thesis of my book. That's the premise of my book that came out last year. It's called Beyond the Known. And
Beyond the narrative. The exploration that created the modern world, correct?
Yeah, how exploration created the modern world. Because I think it's sort of the story of humanity, is we are explorers. And this is the thing that has given us all our technology. You think about the things that make us modern. It's railroads, it's automobiles, it's airplanes, it's ships, it's telegraphs and internet, which is the movement of ideas and information. Our human technology is based around movement of people, goods, and ideas. And all of that comes because we force ourselves to go out. We push ourselves to expand our boundaries, and that's exploration.
And that's an excellent point. And you saying that, you actually answered something that I noticed in the game. Now, in the game, Asia, okay, is kind of confined to Earth. They can get out to space in the beginning when they first start off. And that they have to rely on other technologies to get technology, because they don't have the development to go beyond the stars or even get to the moon. So by sharing what you just kind of said, I almost feel that you kind of said, we need to share this data so we all can explore, so we can all venture out.
So the spread of technology.
Am I wrong?
No, you're totally right. You're totally right. Throughout history, the spread of technology is almost based on people copying each other.
Right.
Writing evolved maybe as few as 2 times, probably 3 or 4 times throughout the world. Right? There was a New World writing, and there was Chinese script, basically hieroglyphics or the characters, and then there was Sumerian, and then the Egyptians probably copied the Sumerians, and then everyone. So once you know something is possible, it's much easier to develop it. To come up with a complete idea that's completely fresh slate is really difficult. But almost always, people see what other people are doing and adopt the idea, or maybe even modify the idea. Agriculture, for example, started in the New World and in the Old World, right? And then the idea of agriculture spread across Eurasia. Maybe it had a slightly independent genesis in sub-Saharan Africa with sorghum and what's the other one? Taro, I guess. But it's kind of unclear if that was separate. Yeah.
No, I mean, really fascinating. Another thing I want to ask you. Okay, you said you have a family. How many children do you have?
Just one.
Just one? How old?
2.5.
2.5?
Yeah.
Because you've also written some children's books.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I have 4 children's books. 3 are in a series called Epic Space Adventure.
Epic Space Adventure.
Epic Space Adventure. Yeah.
Mars Rover Rescue, I believe, is another one. Which and what led you to that? I mean, you go from one extreme writing these books, and then you decided. I mean, are you trying to, build up the imagination of children to maybe because you find that very rare nowadays, okay? Because a lot of them are doing this the entire time, okay? And they don't look beyond this phone. Their universe is this phone, which is, which is a scary thing. So having our next generation, and especially me, I'm nearly 60, okay? And I look to where are we going to go? Okay. And when you look at the stars, how are we going to get there if we don't have the young imaginations to do that? And then I see these books, I've got a bunch of grandchildren and, a bunch of grandchildren, geez. but my youngest grandson, his imagination and, he has no interest in TV or anything. He wants to venture, and that spirit is something that really moves me. So, when I see somebody that reaches out and says, hey, look, there's so much more that we have to discover. We're not done yet,
Yeah. In a way, the idea behind the first book, and actually the book series, really, Epic Space Adventure, is kind of the same as the game. It's just on a different level. And the idea is in school, or just whatever, when we're young, we learn the planets, right? We learn
Mm-hmm.
to name the planets, and usually for people, that's where it stops. They can name all the planets, but they don't know anything about them. Maybe there's some astrology in there too. But anyway, they don't know they don't know anything about the solar system beyond just the names of the planets, right?
Mm-hmm.
But the most interesting part of the solar system is actually all the different moons. And you have Europa, which may have life under its icy surface, and it's the largest skating rink that we know of in the galaxy, basically. Titan, where it's thick air, it's kind of Earth-like, but very cold. And the gravity is very low, and the atmosphere is very thick, so you could actually strap on wings. A human could strap on wings and fly like a bird on Titan. And you could skydive without a parachute because the terminal velocity is like 15 miles per hour.
Really?
You could just spread out your arms and just fall, and you'd be fine. Yeah. So these are some of the things, and then there's thousands of asteroids out there and the other thing is, like, even from a resource perspective, all the resources we mine, the metals that we've ever really mined, come from asteroids. They hit Earth later because Earth was this giant ball, and as it cooled, all the heavy stuff sank towards the middle. And so all the iron we mine, the platinum and the gold and the diamond, well, actually not the diamonds, those are volcanic, but most of the things we mine bombarded Earth after it formed. Possibly the water too, from comets and stuff. And so the lesson there is, Earth is actually a resource poor place. Most of the minerals in the solar system are actually in asteroids. And there's some asteroids that are like solid chunks of iron nickel. That small asteroid could yield more metals than we've harvested in the entire history of our civilization. Mm-hmm. And so the solar system is not only a much larger and much more fascinating place than we realize and are taught, but it's also the source of potentially wealth and could support vast numbers of humans and all this kind of stuff. And it's kind of, so science fiction has generally pretty much ignored all of that. The only popular science fiction show that recently has touched on it is The Expanse. So in a way,
which is a show that you really like. Yeah,
it's sorry. Awesome. Yeah, The Expanse is really great. Yeah.
Now, Star Trek, new generation or the original?
I kind of like all Star Trek. It's hard to pick. I mean, they're different, right? And so different ways. Mm-hmm. I find Next Generation kind of the most, I don't know, it's pretty campy and a little bit cheesy, but it's really satisfying. So right. I think maybe that's my favorite. Deep Space Nine tells a really great story, really, really great political story. Yeah. So that's good too. I like that. The old series is good. I mean, I like it has maybe some of the best triad of characters with Bones and Spock.
Oh, yeah.
That's so good, their interactions. And also some of the stories were really prescient, especially for the 60s. It's amazing. I recently watched the one where they have this war between planets, and instead of actually fighting the war because it's really destructive and they're going to destroy all their infrastructure and cities and stuff, they just made an agreement between the two planets that they're just going to have computers fight the war for them and figure out how many people die, and then people would report to disintegration chambers. The computer simulation says there's been a neutron bomb and 20 million people died. So instead of actually destroying the cities, actually I think a neutron bomb may not do that, but anyway, instead of actually destroying the cities, and causing all this damage, we're just going to have 20 million people report to the disintegration chambers, and everyone just follows the rules, and they're like, you randomly selected or whatever, and they're just following the rules of this computer that was established hundreds of years ago. That's an amazing idea, even now, let alone for the late 60s, right?
Now, what's your favorite episode? I'll let you pick two.
Yeah.
I'll let you pick two.
I don't know. I mean, I kind of like Redemption. That's the Klingon one where Worf goes home and there's a Klingon Civil War. That one might be the best. I don't know. Yeah, Best of Both Worlds is really good with the Borg. The first Next Gen with the Borg.
Yeah. Borg were always interesting.
If you're talking old series, I like the one with the Romulans, probably Balance of Terror. That's it's really good. Yeah.
Really, really smart and very well.
It really is. Yeah, it was so Cold War too, and
definitely. Yeah. For me, Doomsday Machine. I don't know what it is about that giant log. The giant.
I know this one, that it's a planet killer, but I don't
Yeah, the
remember
Planet
actually.
Killer.
I think I've watched it recently. If I've seen it, I think I've seen it, but I haven't watched it recently yet. I don't remember.
Yeah, I mean, the thing was just so cool. I mean, it was just this giant log that was just going to destroy everything that it comes in its path, and trying to figure out how to stop it. And, unbeatable foe, but we find a way to beat the foe. Kind of like the Gorn.
Yeah, that's cool.
There was no way to beat him, but wait a minute, yeah, now you got it.
Peter, yeah,
rudimentary laid, like they say in Galaxy Quest. Now, do you like a lot of science fiction movies?
I do, yeah. I mean, yeah, I like historical movies almost as much. The funny thing is, I'm almost, interest more into history than science. I mean, I'm into both, probably equally, but I mean, war games is my passion in terms of gaming, so more than science fiction games, actually. In fact, you mentioned other space games. I have never played another space game, I have to say, so it's not possible that the game was influenced by them. Probably I should have, but I didn't.
We've got a ton of questions here, so I want to fit some of those in. And then I've got some more stuff for you, but we have a great community that loves to add in, so I'm going to read this off to you. Andrew, how do you translate scientific principles into game mechanics? Is there something that your game does than others, say Phil Eklund's designs?
Yeah. So I started with a giant spreadsheet. This is how games always start for me, is figuring out sort of the relative balance of things, and this would probably work. And you basically make a game, not in your head, but on paper, right? Like just in a spreadsheet. The spreadsheet is the game. It has all the rules. It has how everything works. And originally, I have to say, this game was a lot more complicated. So it's gigantic. It's huge. But this is the very simple version of the game. It used to be really ridiculous. So it was a spreadsheet, and this was a much, much more complicated game. And actually, kind of for little mechanics and stuff, a little bit more realistically, we used to have moving planets, and every year was different. You'd have different launch windows. You'd have different energy, the fuel you'd have to spend to land on different planets and stuff like that. So it used to be much more complicated. So it started out trying to do everything in terms of as realistic as possible. And you basically used to have character sheets for your ships, and you would design your ships based on like your character sheet. And it was all pencil and paper and stuff like that. Yep. And I play tested it a bunch with people, and it worked, but it was really complicated, and I didn't think I could really get enough people to play it. So from there, I just started simplifying, and it was like video editing. You start with like recording everything, and then you just have to cut the fat, basically, and you have to make it playable. So it started out as basically a simulation on a spreadsheet, and then I just cut out things until it was playable as a game. And every rule in the game has to justify its worth. It has to be worth the space it takes up on the page, and it has to be worth the time you're going to spend playing it. The major change that we did to get this game released as it is the game is based on designing ships, and it's not obvious because in the game you're given ships, right?
Yeah.
And the game sort of at its core, under the hood, still does have ship designs, but I had to reverse engineer all the ships. So the counters, the ships you're given, are actually ships that I just designed for you, and I didn't tell you I did it. And the expansion that we're doing, that's coming out pretty soon, is actually you get to design your ships. But it's really cool. Like the ship design for me is one of the most fun things. But it's also, kind of more complicated. And it takes a little bit longer. And the game's already so complicated and so long that I wanted to have a simple version first. And it's kind of a way to teach people. And also some people are just going to stop there, and that's totally fine.
I've got to say, out there, Callendale, who is a really great wargaming channel, he's done a couple of excellent videos. And then this newcomer that I watched, he did like a 30-part, and each one of them's an hour.
He's still working on it.
Yeah, Ben Gaming.
Ben Gaming. Yeah, I've been watching both, actually. They're really good. Yeah.
Very well done, very smart, really taking and breaking a fantastic game down. This is not a game that you're gonna get and then you can do a review a day or two later. I mean, this is something that you're gonna have to put some time into and really delve into. And I think it's well worth it because of the complexity and yet the beauty that you you've done here. I look at those ships and those counters and everything that you've done, and it's SpaceX. Some of those ships are SpaceX from the from the liftoff vehicles to the
pretty much
and just looking at everything that you've done, the flyaways and things like that, all those different types of ships that are and satellites and things like that. Yeah, this will go by, but that might be your objective, but it's already passed.
Yeah.
And some of those things. Really amazing. And then making the Russians just badasses is just cool onto itself.
Yeah. Well, it's true, actually. Historically, I mean, Mir, they put up with so much stuff. They had a fire, and they literally had fist fights. And they would always bring vodka, of course. The Russian crews just put up with whatever. So
whatever.
It'd be kind of fun to make their ability that the Russian crews don't give up as much.
They don't shake, they don't bend, nothing.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And then then with the Japanese and the robots.
Yeah, the robots.
Everything that you've done here is not too far outside the realm of possibility. And I think that's what really makes this so beautiful, is that you actually feel, we can actually do this.
Yeah, totally. I mean, the goal is to have everything in the simplest way possible. That was my goal, to kind of have every kind of sort of space mission you could do and show that as simple as possible, while still going over 120 years, or 150 years, I guess it is.
Yeah.
150 years, which is just an incredibly long time span. And of course that means 150 turns, but the turns are mostly pretty short. So it's,
Yeah, because I mean, and the way I'm reading everything, and I've been watching the videos waiting to get this in. My excitement has been off the chart. And again, I want to thank Compass Games for bringing you on here. First of all, I mean that unto itself is amazing to have you on the show, and I really appreciate it. And you taking your time. I know we don't have a lot of time because you're a very busy man. I mean, obviously from all the things you do. I mean, you're kind of
I'm kind of a workaholic.
I mean, you're paid. Go ahead.
Yeah. No, these are hobbies. I mean, so basically, I have a full-time job, and then I just do this kind of evenings and weekends because I enjoy it. It's what I like to do is write books and make games and play games. Yeah.
And I look at your resume, and you're basically Buckaroo Banzai.
I don't know that reference. Wasn't that in
that's everybody else
Quentin Tarantino or something like that?
No. It was actually a campy movie where the guy was like a nuclear physicist, rock star, author, teacher, and he just fought off all the aliens. It's the most campiest movie you'll ever see. Mm-hmm. It's actually not very good, but it actually has a big cult status. Mm-hmm. And the first thing I'm looking at this, I go, this guy's an astrophysicist, engineer, excuse me, author, game designer, podcaster. And where can people find your podcast, as a matter of fact?
Yeah, it's on iTunes. You can search for my name probably on iTunes and find it.
Okay.
Yeah, Spellbound it's called. You can go to my website and find a link to everything, basically, which is just my name, Andrew Rader.
And you even have a YouTube channel, which is wildly popular.
I do. I don't post that much to it anymore. I don't have time to do that, but I used to do a lot of videos. Yeah.
Okay, we got a question here. What does Andrew think of the solar sail ship Cisco built on DS9?
I remember that episode. As I recall, though, the solar sail is way too small for actually propelling the ship, because for a ship like that, I think you would need several kilometers of sail, like a gigantic sail. And I don't think it was that big, actually, if I recall. So I don't think it would actually work as depicted. Maybe you could probably have a solar sail ship that had people on board, but it would have the sail, I think, would have to be a lot bigger. I could be misremembering, but I have in my head what the ship looked like, and it was too small. But yeah, there've been some recent solar sail experiments. Light Sail 2 actually launched on my rocket last summer in June, and it's pretty cool. So I think solar sails are really cool. They are a component that you can build and design into your ships in the expansion, which was kind of the original, in fact, but now the expansion. Yeah.
All right, we got another question here. What's more difficult, designing Stellar Horizon or planning a manned trip to Mars?
The real thing is way more difficult because there's all these things you don't think about. I kind of feel like in the game, in fact, someone asked about how come I can transfer resources to my base in another planetary system, like so I can transfer instantaneously resources from Earth to Mars or to the moon or to some other place that's really far away. Actually, the moon makes sense because it's closer. But the answer is because you have a really good logistics team under the hood. And you actually had planned ahead, but you forgot about it, because when you talk about real space missions, there's just so many things to consider in terms of having supplies. And remember, like you have a launch window every 2 years. So you have to put in place things way in advance, and you have to just do so much background contingency planning on what might happen and what you might need. And 3D printing, for example, is a great way to partly deal with that. You can make things you would need, but the logistics is very simplified in the game. I mean, there's still a lot of planning, but it's the kind of planning you can do at your kitchen table in a day rather than have armies of logisticians. Is that a word? I think that's logic. No, people who do logistics. Yeah.
Believe me, you don't. You're allowed to do whatever, because I mess up more things trying to pronounce things. I'm actually partially deaf in an ear, so I butcher everything. Don't worry about it. You're fine. And a funny thing here, and like I told you, I was going to get beat up with this. Buckaroo Banzai Across the Eighth Dimension. Rob, how dare you say it's not a good movie? It's a blast. It's something you got to see if you get it.
Cool.
So
I'll add it to the list. Yeah.
And you'll look at it, and I think you'll get the reference that I was trying to say. One of the things I wanted to ask you, Compass is such a fantastic company, and how did you get hooked up and get this fantastic project going? First of all, Bill, John, and everybody are fantastic, and for you to have a Kickstarter, in November and have this out in June, I mean, that is a testament to how good and efficient Compass is. But I would love to hear the story on how you guys came together, and more about how we came to what we have today.
Yeah, I did Fatal Alliances with Compass, and I just kind of got connected with him through Harry Rowland, who's the designer of World in Flames, who I've met many times, and basically I ended up working on a bunch of projects for him on the annual originally, like their publication, but a lot of expansions for the game for World in Flames. And I had read a lot about World War One. Like sort of a few years ago, I went on a World War One kick and just read everything I could about it. Got really interested in it, and they were looking to revamp, I guess, Fatal Alliances, which is the World War One variant of World in Flames, because it had been done before. I guess there had been actually 2 versions of it originally years ago, but it wasn't compatible at all with the new system. And I mean, I just really loved still love World War One history. I thought it, in many ways, I think the First World War is much more interesting than the second. We tend to focus on the second.
Okay. Now, why do you feel that way?
Yeah, because of the politics and the diplomatics. Because it wasn't what do you call it? A total war, where the goal was unconditional victory. So there were so many different possible outcomes of negotiations, and it was also not clear, who were the baddies, basically, as they say, right? And so all this stuff in the Balkans with Romania. Which side is Romania going to join? Which side is Italy going to join? Who knows? It's this big political mix-up that, and the Russian Revolution. I mean, in terms of present-day effects, obviously the Second World War, created the Cold War and that kind of thing, and fascism and all that kind of stuff. But in many ways, the First World War had a much bigger impact on the world. It totally revolutionized literally the systems of government in Europe. The Russian Empire collapsed and replaced with communism, and the Austro-Hungarian Empire completely collapsed and fell apart. The German Empire, colonialism started ending based on that, although it took until at the end of the Second World War. Completely changed all of that. America, first major participation in an overseas, the Spanish-American War, but in an international conflict like that. So it sort of brought America onto the world stage. I also think it's really nuanced. So Americans tend to think, we won World War II, which is not really true. It was really, more on the Eastern Front, most of the German troops. But I think that you can make a strong case that America's involvement in the First World War was decisive, whereas in Europe, it wasn't really decisive. In the Pacific, certainly was. So you could say that America's impact on World War I was actually greater than in World War II. I think there's a strong case there. But anyway, just from all the negotiations afterwards and who wants what territory and the Ottoman Empire and it's just so fascinating, the politics and diplomacy around it. And also even militarily, you think about the First World War and you think trenches, right? And that's true. Yeah. I mean, the trench, and it's kind of boring, and it was stalemated for 4 years.
I don't know if it's really boring. I think it's a lot more, where there were in World War II, there were more tanks and planes and things like that, where you could be behind. You had to have some kind of intestinal fortitude, something special inside to go through some of those areas and fight the way they had to fight.
Oh yeah, no doubt. Like shell shock. I mean, it totally broke lots of people. Yeah, no doubt at all. Although I think the Second World War, you could probably say the same thing.
True.
To a large degree. But what my point was that most of the First World War was not like the Western Front. The Eastern Front was really dynamic, and you didn't have static trench warfare for 4 years. And the Eastern Front was probably bigger in terms of the number of troops involved in the First World War as well as on the Second. And the Middle East was really dynamic, and there was even stuff overseas and in Africa and stuff. So I wanted to try to capture a lot of that. And we always say, the Germans made a terrible mistake by invading Russia in World War II, and that is probably true based on the situation, how it turned out, and their planning for it, and that logistics and supply and that kind of thing.
50 miles in a snowstorm. 50 miles in a snowstorm.
Right. But we forget that Germany actually beat Russia in World War I. It's the only invasion of Russia never works, except actually it did once. Yeah.
I mean, they were actually beat a few times, if you really think about it.
Well, the Poles also. The time before, the only time I can think of before that was around 18. Moscow was occupied by the Poles. After Boris Godunov.
Yeah. So get back with
Mongols.
Mongols. I want to go back to the whole compass thing. So your design, you're working with the World War I. We got off track, of course.
We're on a tangent from a tangent, I think. Yeah.
Yeah, from a tangent.
So anyway, I did Fatal Alliances with Compass just because Harry was looking for a company to help produce Fatal Alliances, and they found Compass because Compass has an awesome reputation as a war game company. I think that Compass was sort of interested in branching out a little bit from war games to try something a little bit different. And I had this game that, as I said, I've basically been working on Stellar Horizons for about 15 years, and I just had it as a side project. And it was to some extent kind of, I thought, too big. I was trying to kind of because it started out huge, right? I was trying to make it more playable, right? The goal was constantly to make it more playable. So I just said, hey, are you guys interested in doing this space game I have, Stellar Horizons? And they thought that was a great idea because they were also interested in sort of branching out a little bit more into this. And they approached this to make it really beautiful. Like the components are just gorgeous, right? And so they got a great artist, Brienne, and they just really wanted to make this something that looked great on a table, and they really did a great job with that.
I mean, it had to blow you away when you saw some of this art.
Oh,
some of this art is ridiculous.
It's really good. Yeah. And Brienne did such an amazing job, and it was actually his idea to split it up into tiles, which is a great idea for a number of reasons. One, it's visually appealing. The other, it's kind of modular, right? So I had the way I had done most of the playtesting actually was on a map. And it was kind of the same as what it is in a sense. Like the information was the same, but the presentation was really different, right? I think the tiles are just gorgeous, and the map was kind of ugly, to be honest. So I think really great decision, and you can play smaller scenarios without putting out all the tiles. And otherwise, you'd get confused with this big map, right? So it's pretty good. Yeah, I mean that's really good. And Brienne went totally overboard in a good way with the ships, right? The ship graphics. Wow. All the ships are unique and stuff like that. Yeah. And
then what he did with the placemats for each country.
Yeah.
I like when you turn it over, you look.
Yeah. He made unique space station designs for each country.
Yeah,
Cool. I didn't expect that. I just had when I had the playtest version, I just basically had NASA images, which are open source or which are public domain, basically, so you can use stuff from NASA basically as images. But it's way cooler if you have each country having sort of a futuristic, unique to their character designs, ship designs, and so you kind of have like a bit of a Japanese pagoda flavor to the Japanese space stations and stuff like that, which is kind of cool.
And it was such a nice, even the Russian stations, they felt, you look at it, man, that's what I would expect the Russian station to look like. It just everything had a certain feel to it, and the themes there and everything just kind of sucks you in. Like I can't wait to have this all over this table. And it's a big imprint, but it also, being a big imprint, you kind of have everything right in front of you. You know what I mean? Where, a lot of people play smaller games that you could have right in front of you, have everything in front of you. But this big imprint, no matter how big it is, you always feel that everything's right in front of you and where you need it and how you progress forward with it. And that's the thing that I really am just blown away by so far.
It is big. You can fit it on 4x8. I think that's slightly smaller maybe, but I set up a 4x8 and it fits really comfortably. So, which is big. Maybe
that's big.
Yeah, that's big, but
that's great though.
It's not as big as World in Flames, though. It's about half the size. So, I mean, most people look at this game and say, "Oh my gosh, it's so huge," and I look at the game and say, "Well, it's way smaller than World of Flames. It takes way less time to play because that's the game I'm used to." So for me, it's kind of like, "Oh, this is a small game. It's not as big as World of Flames."
So I know we're tight on time here, but I do have a couple more questions for you. Number one, what's the next thing you want to do? You conquered space. What game do you have in your mind that you want to do? I mean, this is obviously already getting plenty of buzz, big hit, but I don't ever see you sitting on your laurels. What do you got next that you're thinking of or you want to tackle next?
Well, actually, I mean, there's more with this game. Is probably
that was the second question. Because and I guess I'll go right to the second question, more or less, is you did this universe, but knowing you and how your adventurer spirit and how you want to expand, are you going beyond?
Yes, I would like to. So I've received a number of suggestions on BGG from people who want to see various types of expansions, one of which was sort of always going to be there, which is making the ship design, because ship design is really cool, right? So
that just sounds phenomenal right off the thing.
Yeah, so I think ship design is the number one and most obvious thing, and we got to do that. It's to me, it's kind of in some sense the core of the game. It's under the hood, and a lot of players aren't going to want to spend the time or kind of learn it, but many players will just salivate over that and just it'll be their favorite thing, right? And for me, it kind of is my favorite thing. So so we got to do the ship design. So that's the first expansion for sure. I actually hadn't really thought about this, but the mechanism for the game works really well if you expand it up a level. So you start at the game is in the solar system, and you move between planetary systems.
Right.
The game would work. The core rules would work very, very well if you had solar systems and you went from star to star, and it worked exactly the same way, and you would just move from star to star. So I think that's a great expansion, is starting at the end of this game and sort of doing basically Star Trek, but realistic Star Trek. So that would be amazing. And you have like Alpha Centauri, and you have Wolf 359, and all the sort of nearby stars, Sirius and whatever, and you go and explore other stars, and you settle those, and then you have places. It's basically kind of like Master of Orion as a game in some sense, where you go from star to star and move around, right? So I think that would be awesome. The thing is, though, the reason why it almost isn't an expansion, but it's like Stellar Horizons 2, because everything is different, because the technology starts at a more advanced place.
Right.
The map you can't use because it's not the solar system. It's different stars, right? So you can use a lot of the same game mechanics and give it almost exactly the same feel. You can have a tech tree. You can have the same transfer boxes. You can have all the game mechanics work the same, but all the pieces are different. So it's not. So I don't see how that could really be an expansion, but it could definitely be another sort of addendum, kind of Stellar Horizons 2, which is going out into the galaxy. Yeah.
Now, would you try to introduce alien life?
Yeah, I think so. Okay, that also gets into a really interesting question because.
Yeah.
So I kind of believe that aliens probably exist, but I don't think we're going to meet them anytime soon. I don't believe in alien visitations of Earth and that kind of stuff. I do believe that there may be bacteria on Mars or Europa or other places in our solar system, and indeed in stellar horizons you can find life. But when we say life, it means like basically bacteria. Right?
Yeah.
Are there going to be like Spock, Vulcans, and little green men and stuff like that?
Or something.
I don't know. It's a good question. So, stellar horizons.
Is there an Earth 2?
Right. Well, there will be Earth 2s, but is it inhabited? It's probably not. There's probably algae planets. So I think that probably go to another solar system, we'll find a planet covered in algae, right? Or strange plants or something like that. But are we going to find humanoid aliens that we interact with at our approximate level of technology, like in Star Trek or Babylon 5 or whatever? Probably not. So I don't know. I think so. Stellar Horizon has the Space Invader, and so it could happen, right? Right. That's an interesting question. I think I would not have humanoid aliens play a major role, but maybe a minor role, or they could exist or something like that. But I would have probably life that you could find, that serious life. Plants, and you could find a planet where you can grow plants really well, and you can find like even abundant plants. You can find an ocean world where you can harvest from the sea, and you can get fish, and whatever the fish would be like. Maybe they're different fish, that kind of thing, right? But I think that there would. So my guess is there would be life, but not necessarily humanoid aliens that we interact with. But I would want to include that as a possibility somehow. But it's just so, I mean, the core, for me, it has to be kind of realistic in some sense. And the idea that there's humanoid aliens nearby at a similar level of technology to us is very nearly impossible, just because of the rate that civilizations progress. They would be well ahead of us in technology or way behind. So it's more like we would have Vorlons or something like that, who are like Babylon 5. But they'd be those aliens that are like have almost transcended the galaxy. Or we're finding, animals that will maybe eventually develop into humanoid life. Well, or not necessarily humanoid, but intelligent life. And I think if there was intelligent life, it's probably going to be different. Actually, this is something I talk about a lot in my book. I have a whole chapter about what alien life would be like.
Yeah.
And I think it's more likely there might be like octopuses underwater or something like that.
That's an interesting thought. Yeah, because I mean, if you really think about it, how would we, especially when you take the circumstance, as you put it, where the Earth is made up and all its materials are from being hit by all these asteroids and so forth and so on, which form the Earth. What are the chances of that happening at the same time somewhere else? And life doing the same thing like this.
Well, yeah, it's more the timeline at which it's. All of the history of life is sort of fairly random and accidental in some sense. I mean, it's driven by natural selection, but like it could have taken different paths and taken different amounts of time by vastly different amounts. I mean, human civilization has been around for 10,000 years, but life has been around for 3 billion or 2 billion years, right? And that's a very long time compared to the development of technology. Technology passes millions of times faster than the evolution of life. So the idea that you would have life take exactly the same amount of time, and then your technology would progress in a similar manner is the scales are going to be just really different. It's not that there won't be intelligent life; it's that intelligent life is going to progress so much faster or so much less fast than it does on Earth. However, there is actually an interesting way by which aliens could come into it, which I think is very realistic and is probably in our future, is that humans will diverge into different cultures and civilizations across space, and we will be the aliens. So there will be kind of Star Trek where you have Klingons and Romulans and stuff, but they all descend from us. And this idea is explored by Arthur C. Clarke a little bit, where they have like the Hermians.
Who is a genius.
A Mercury, and they have a totally different culture because they're totally blasted by sun's radiation. So they live underground, and their eyes have changed because they don't use them very much, and that kind of thing, right? And they sort of evolved they used to be humans, but now they're kind of like not exactly human anymore, right? Because it's just hundreds of years have passed. Actually, even in the Expanse, you have the Belters, which are diverging from people on Earth and people on Mars, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I think so. There could be that. Actually, it depends when it's set in timeline, but it could definitely have different cultures of spacefaring people who originated on Earth.
Okay, one last question, because I'm keeping an eye on the time for you, pal. I got your back here. Okay, why space pirates?
Space pirates. Well, so to be honest, so it started a little bit as I need to make ways for people to fight because the game doesn't have that much combat in it, and you can almost argue it's not in your own interest to kind of develop a military and stuff. So I kind of tried to give Cold War reasons to fight.
Right.
In a sense, and part of that's initiative, and part of that's sort of an arms race and just being armed, deterrent, basically. So if you're armed, people aren't going to attack you, but if you're completely defenseless, well, then maybe I'm going to take your stuff, right?
Mm-hmm.
A little bit.
Right.
So it kind of like is an arms race in a sense, and pirates are kind of one of the ways to ratchet up the tension, because you have to build warships to fight the pirates. And if you don't, then they're going to steal from you, and you're going to be better off having some form of defense. So it kind of is a way to encourage you to develop some level of defense in space and some level of warships. And once you have all that, well, maybe then there's more conflict between players. So it is a bit of a way to do that. It's also a way to have some conflict without necessarily wanting to fight between players. And also, I think it's realistic. Like, not in the next 20, 30 years, we're not going to have space pirates, but you talk about 80 to 100 years in Mars bases and people like living in different worlds in our solar system. And I think that is a realistic way by which it could actually happen, because you're going to have ships traveling for vast distances completely unprotected and hauling cargoes of precious ore and stuff like that. People are going to want to steal it.
They're going to take it. You're going to go through all the trouble of mining all those asteroids. Yeah. Somebody's going to want to take it without having to do the work. I mean, I think it's just brilliant. Well, listen, I want to thank you so much for being here today. And I'm telling you right now, my hat's off once again to everybody at Compass Games. I mean, they're always knocking it out of the park. These guys are fantastic, and yet another fantastic game. Dr. Andrew Rader, thank you so much for being on here. And guys, go to the website at Compass Games. You can order this now, and I assume it'll be at Miniature Market very soon. Our great sponsor, of course. We have to mention them all the time as well. But make sure you get this. If you do not get this, you will be extremely disappointed and kicking yourself, because when this goes, I'm telling you, and it's going to go fast. This is an unbelievable, passionate, realistic look at 4X space travel, and it does so many wonderful things. Go take a look. Go take a look at some Callendale's video, Ben Gaming's videos, which are doing a fantastic job. And Andrew, thank you so much for explaining so many of the fantastic things that you've done here. And hats off to you. I mean, books, YouTube, game design, SpaceX. Jeez, you do it all, my friend.
Thanks. Yeah, my pleasure. It was a lot of fun. Thank you very much.
All right. Yeah, just hang on for a second. Everybody, thanks for watching. And until next time, for War and Pieces, it's your old pal, Rob. We will see you soon.